Walnuts raw, excellent. Apples, excellent. Bananas, again, not 3 hours before bed. Yes, Doc, you had a question?
What's the O? After bananas.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And again, I don't say these things happily that we have to go at organic. I'm not happy about that fact. It's more expensive and it's harder to find. This is important. Now, I've talked about this off and on. Whenever you have a chronic health problem, in my humble opinion, and there's research out there that supports it, there's always an emotional component. I told you the story about the lady with the daughter who had rheumatoid, who didn't want to get better because she thought her daughter would go back to Montana. Or the guy at the coffee shop that was a pathological nightmare that definitely didn't want any help. So there's something going on in these people psychologically, whether it's self-loathing or some deep emotional. It's never you, so never take it personal. There's something going on with the person's neuroemotional dynamics. So there's one lesson that I give, and I'm going to give the precursor to it that I have them do that I took the training on. I was sexually abused when I was 8 years old. And sometimes we get those things that happen to us and we carry them through our adult life. They can create significant problems with us. So one of the things, exercises that I have patients do, and I think I give it to them in week 4, maybe week 3. No, it's week 3. Is to sit down and write down your worst event that have ever happened to you, and write it down in great detail. This is something for you. I'm not trying to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It's something for you to write down. Now I'll give you one interesting. Recently, a person I'm working with, she has stage 4 cancer. I'm not her oncologist. I'm just helping her with her lifestyle. I had her do the exercise. I said, I don't want to know about it. Just do it. So a week went by, 2 weeks went by. She finally did it about 2.5 weeks after I asked her. And her husband had passed away in his early 50s. And she never cried at his funeral. She never cried at his wake. You know, the family reunion, she never cried. But you know what she said when I got through writing that letter? Guess what I did? And this was like 20 some years ago. Interesting, right? So you never know the dynamics involved behind something like that. And she said, I don't know what happened, it just came out. So you can call it, you know, repressed emotion. I'm sure there's deeper medical and psychological terms for that. But the point is, she said it helped her. And she goes, I had no idea that was still affecting me because something had shifted in her, or she blocked it out, or whatever term you want to use. So it's important to get them to become mindful, recognize that. With me, I had to read my letter aloud to a group of 10 strangers. So there were 200 people in this class. It was a 3-day course, and one of them was this exercise. And I was 9. I was the 9th person in a 10-person group. We all had to read our letters. And fortunately, I was last. And by the time I got to reading mine, I was so embarrassed about how trivial my sexual abuse was compared to the people in the group that I was embarrassed to read it. But I'll tell you what happened. After she had everyone read this letter, everyone cried, there's tissues around. You know, some people, there was horrendous stuff happening. Mine was a scale of a 2, we were a 10 plus. She had to reread the letter again. By the 3rd or 4th reread, guess what you heard in the room? Laughter. Laughter at the bad experience, because what had happened was they had made that experience mean so much in their life that it's still traveling with them. Me, was 8 years old, and I think at the time I was in my mid-30s. So here I was dragging that with me for 20 some odd years, and each time that story goes around in my mind, guess what happens to it? It gets what? It's like a fish story. It gets bigger. Made a huge difference. So I incorporate that in my Lean Body 360 program. Makes sense. Some people, it may not affect them so much, but they have to, it's all within themselves, and you begin to retrain them. And once you begin to look at these aspects beyond food and beyond dieting, they realize that, hey, this doctor or this program is really addressing some subtle issues that no one has ever talked about ever. They all have something. Trust me, they all have something. Whenever someone is eating themselves into poor health, and if you ask anyone with obesity or chronic type 2 diabetes that's major drug medications, and you ask them, do you think you're healthy? I guarantee they'll say, no, I don't think I'm healthy. then the next question is, why aren't you concerned about it? Why aren't you doing anything about it? They usually sigh. I don't know. There's something in their subconscious that's pushing that. Risk versus reward. So one of the things that we do, and this I got from Deepak Chopra, is what are we mindful of? What's the risk of what we're doing, and what's the reward if we don't? So the risk is, if you let your health continue to go down the negative pathway, is obviously poor health, but also if you have a family, what about your kids and what about your wife? And you try to get them to realize anything they can to latch onto for motivation. Because vanity, I know a doctor said something, we're in LA, so vanity is all the rage. It doesn't last with this type of work. Or fitting into my dress size for my high school prom and 20-year reunion in 2 weeks or whatever. It's not enough. It's seeing my grandkids, seeing my daughter have, get married, whatever it is. That's what we have to get them to grab onto. And I can almost guarantee you, when doctors begin to take this approach, it changes the whole mindset of the patient. Because remember, a lot of the stuff that's in my book and that I'm teaching here, it's kind of known, low glycemic for most people. You guys are getting it now. But how do you get people to, remember, take passive support and actively put it to play? That's the real key. It took me a number of years, but I figured out how to do it. Most, won't get all successes, but if you can get 8 out of 10 people moving forward, that's a pretty good success rate. Where's the person at? This could be number 1 or it could be number 3. We were talking earlier with a doc with juicing and these other things. I would love everyone to start juicing and eating organic and all the things that we know are good, but how reasonable is that? Not reasonable. I haven't ate organic today. I've had coffee today. I have some negative things. But what can we do for where they're at? Someone that's sick, chronic health problems, MS, whatever it is, where are they at and where can we lead them to over time? And if we meet them where they're at, we give them just enough and we start getting traction. All of us have done something in our lives that we went into it tentatively, we got some positive actions and we went to it more. Now we're kind of devotees, or that's what we want to do. This is no different, especially you start dealing with chronic health problems and wellness issues. Because remember, the media is against. It's against resolving type 2 diabetes. It's resolving, helping, significantly a type 1 or genetic disorder. It doesn't support that. It supports, you're stuck. That's it. Do this and hope for the best. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Any questions? Comments? See? Talk about. So green drinks are great. I don't have a juicer, but I think it's phenomenal. The problem is, for people that are way to the left, people who are processed foods, obese, type 2 diabetics, metabolic syndrome, you might as well be talking to Mars with them. Their idea of juicing is maybe V8 juice, which is pasteurized, not really much help in the digestive or the health support. So do you really want to come at them with stuff like, juicing or get a juicer? It's kind of like someone said, well, what about this alkaline water unit? It's $4,500. Should I spend the money? I go back to, are you supporting your lean body mass? How much processed foods in your diet? Go to simple things that aren't economically so, because what people do is say, oh, well, that's expensive. I can't do that. And then now they put that that psychological barrier up. There's so many barriers that, it's just amazing. But once you can get them over that, they become like the most ardent, for you type of a person, or whether they're a client, you see virtually in my program or face-to-face in your practice, they just grab onto you. Okay, heard doctor talking about some things. So support for diabetics. A lot of this I want people to get in their foods. So alpha lipoic acid, magnesium, there's several types and I'll go over that. Greens, I have a core green that I take, supplies all of this in the food sense. The body seems to process it much better. B vitamins, you have to have all of them. The body's designed to process B's altogether, not just a B12 shot. You need to have the whole complex. Vitamin D, what's the best source of vitamin D? That's right, because there's a sulfur-based component for D2 and 3 that only the sun will give us. So the intake for vitamin D, and I'll go through that slide, is between 3,000 and 7,000 IUs, depending on your body weight, obviously, but the sun is the best source. Then what do I have there? MCT, and then that should be /coconut. Yes, Doc?
So, length of time of day?
As a general rule, from what I read, is you want to avoid the bright time. So between 11 and 2, That's the brightest time. But now that it's winter time, pretty much, any time is okay. But the best time in the summertime is like between 3 and 6 when you get that hot sun, but not the burning sun. Seems to be the best time to get vitamin D. And again, it can be shirts and shorts. 20 minutes should be good enough. And obviously, you're fair skinned, you want to take some precautions, but again, just about being mindful. But definitely, it's definitely the best source. And what's interesting is the FDA gives no dosage on sun exposure vitamin D. It's like, again, they're just agnostic on the comment. They have no comment. But on the pill form, which I take between 3 and 5,000, I think it's in the
off for 400 units.
Yeah.
For the last
A little slow. So CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, real important for mitochondrial function. But again, I like to get these in food, not going out. But what I do recommend all of you start taking right away is a good protein, biological value protein, which is isolated whey. That's just, you have to support your lean body mass. That's the first place to start.
That was Dirk and Sandy. Got that
What the
from
yeah, back in the day.
the first study.
This was back in the mid 1980s, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
They ran the first one.
Yeah, really bright guy. So again, alpha lipoic acid, what's the benefits? I won't read you the whole slide. It's really interesting. It recycles vitamin C and glutathione. How's that possible? Well, what is glutathione? It helps with liver detoxification is one of the things that it does. It's also an amino acid, so it's important. So it's a pretty amazing stuff, and you can get it in a slide will come up that should show you, but dark leafy greens will have it. But the best source I like is broccoli, the heads. Yams, the more color the better, and you need to eat the skin because the enzymes are in the skin. Tomatoes, they need to be raw. Remember, tomatoes are a fruit, not a vegetable. So when you cook them, you acidify them. So if you want to have digestive problems, eat tomato sauces a couple times a week and you'll have digestive irritation and inflammation. Beets, with beets, the power is in the tops. Which if you go to get juice, they only juice the beet, they don't juice the tops, but the power is in the tops. Brussels sprouts, Brussels sprouts, the darker the green, the better. Carrots, cooked, they have a pretty high glycemic load. Raw, they don't. So that's when you're making we've got a soup in my program called Hippocratic soup. I removed, this was from Dr. Max Gerson Clinic. I augmented a little bit, took out the carrots, took out the white potatoes, added some okra and some other things. But again, he's another genius. But back in the 30s and 40s, he was a trailblazer. Actually lost his license a couple times. But brilliant. If you ever want to read a good autobiography, read his, Max Gerson. Rice bran, red meat. We talked about the biological value when you cook it. And particular organ meats. I'm not a big organ meat guy. Just something about eating a filter like a liver or kidney. It just rubs me the wrong way. It's purely, emotional or whatever you want to call it, but I'm not a big organ meat fan. So magnesium, super important, but it always needs to be encompassing with a calcium. 2-to-1 ratio, I think, is the accepted ratio now, but that seems to be changing every other year. Real important. If I don't take it, I take a calcium magnesium supplement, I get cramps in my thighs. Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry. Real important. We're not getting enough, and you'll see this in people who cramp a lot. So cramping is caused by two main things: blood loss or mineral deficiency. There's no other reasons for cramping. Look at that, building block for RNA and DNA. So you think magnesium has a lot to do with our genetic potential? Absolutely. So how many of you guys know what serotonin is good for? What's serotonin do? That's right, doctor knows. It induces the sleep cycle. So as I'm not going to say age, but as we mature, guess what we begin to lose? So I hear sometimes at the club I go to, this doctor, I don't need to sleep 2 hours a night. He's like 70-something, real funny guy. But he sleeps 2 hours a night. He's happy about it. But he looks his age. He looks in his mid-70s. Okay, so sleep is crucial. So does that mean he has a magnesium deficiency? possibly, but it's definitely something to consider. But real important component to regulate sleep. And what happens when we sleep? What do we release the first hour? HGH. You see how it all kind of, it's all in one circle. There's no, everything kind of supports each other. So many choices of magnesium. I thought this chart was important to put out. So, chelated form appears to be the best absorbed. It's a chelated form of magnesium. Like you'll see chelated minerals, or yeah, I think some people call them chelated, but their actual pronunciation is chelated. They seem to be the easiest to absorb by the body. And the magnesium, glycinated magnesium, appears to be pretty good for dealing with deficiencies. Now, there are different types depending on what's going on. Antacids, so you'll see this one used. So what do we know about calcium carbonate? Can't absorb it. Magnesium the same way. It's designed to buffer, but there's no real functional use. Citrate's another decent one, pretty cost effective. You'll see this one in most supplements because it's the cheaper form. The thionate appears to be the best but the most expensive, and you'll see it in higher end magnesiums. So if you had a patient that can afford it, they're struggling with a calcium mag supplement doesn't work, look into threonate, and studies look pretty interesting on that. So we have to see milk of magnesia again, magnesium oxide, the non-chelated type. It's more for, again, symptomatic relief, stool softening. Someone has hard stools, give them a couple extra teaspoons of coconut oil within a day, solve the problem. Because sometimes the intestines aren't dry from a water standpoint, they're dry from a fat standpoint. Make sense? Again, goes back to what? Diabetes again. See how it all comes full circle. Higher magnesium intake reduces risk of impaired glucose and insulin metabolism, and progressive from pre-diabetes to diabetes in middle-aged Americans. So nutrition plays a huge role, but they're saying magnesium. Now, does it play a role because of magnesium deficiency, or does it play a role because it reduces serotonin production, which interferes with sleep? You see how it's a kind of a double-edged negative sword? I think it's probably a little bit of both. Outside of testing intercellular levels, there's no easy answer, but from what I'm seeing out there, there's a couple companies, it's a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts calcium, 1 part magnesium. That's a best guess because there's no definitive number on that. But you should always take it mixed. That's for sure. And you'll see 3-to-1. You'll see calcium, magnesium with B vitamins. You'll see different ways. And you know what's nice is you really can't go wrong. You'll know. I know within a half hour after getting a thigh cramp. But since my MUA, I haven't had one. But it helped. Okay, B vitamins, you hear all the rage. Patients will come in, oh, I got a B12 shot today. I feel great. Well, you need all of them. That's why there's B what? Complex. You need all of them to really, for the metabolic system to be appropriately supported, not just one. So if you're going to do a B12 shot, great. Make sure you're taking a B complex orally to support that. So B1, pretty familiar with that. Found in cereals, rice. What kind of rice? White or brown? Okay. Because the B vitamins are in the husk. That's correct. Fortified cereals and pasta. Just understand that fortified cereals, they don't always put all the vitamins back. They maybe put, they take out 12, they may put back 2 or 3. I don't know what the actual number was they have in order to use fortified, but it's rarely what they start out with. So again, we go back to what? Dark leafy greens, fenugreek, spinach. I don't care for fenugreek, but spinach is okay. Lettuce, the darker the better. Iceberg lettuce, don't even have it in your fridge. All it is about 60% water. Hard to digest, digestive irritant. Cabbage, the darker the better. Asparagus, obviously. Soy foods, but they need to be what? Fermented, except milk. So milk, remove that, I would. But edamame and fermented soy appears to be okay.
Tofu?
Tofu is okay. The research says it appears to be okay. Pork, ham, nuts, and nuts need to be what? You guys are smart. Riboflavin, some of the best sources of riboflavin are chicken, fish, eggs. See, eggs keeps coming back into a lot of things. So what's the media trying to teach us about eggs? Oh, they're bad. Unfortunately, you can taste the difference between a commercial egg and an organic egg, and I'm not happy about that, but you can taste the difference. And where do you see, again, you'll start seeing this over and over again, nuts. But a lot of research doesn't define raw or roasted. And you can actually go online and find out some interesting comments on, well, roasted seems to be okay. I'm just not in that camp. There's two sides of thought. So green leafy vegetables like spinach, broccoli, they're again, the powerhouse comes back in. Broccoli, asparagus is back again. So as a general rule is, go back to my Ayurvedic roots, or my Ayurvedic training, the darker the vegetable, the more colorful, the better. That's generally a pretty good rule to go by. So B3, niacin. I once was on a niacin kick. How many of you see patients take niacin, they get a what? Peripheral flush. Supposedly that's testing the peripheral blood supply. And the higher dose you take, the better your peripheral blood supply. So I was up to like 1,500 milligrams in a shot, and I like the feeling. I haven't done it in a while, but I've had patients take 5 milligrams and go berserk, and usually that means their cardiovascular system is not very healthy. Because obviously you want to do some objective testing for that, but that's a general rule. So there's the B3, the niacin, which is the flushing, then there's the nicotinamide, which is the non-flushing. So again, we go back to protein sources. So you see how vegetarians, they have to eat legumes, but the problem with legumes is you're also eating carbohydrates, and the protein intake isn't that great. So vegetarians, as a general rule, have a very high what? Carbohydrate diet. Healthier, but still carbohydrate diet. So meeting their lean body mass requirements is difficult. Not impossible, just difficult. B6, can we go back to beans? Same thing holds true. The more colorful, the better. So black bean or lentil, colored lentil, things of that nature appear to be more nutritionally dense. B12, cobalamin, we talked about that. You know, red meat keeps popping up a lot. Eggs keep popping up a lot. Biotin. Here's another myth. Remember the show Rocky where he was drinking those raw eggs? Actually extracting biotin from his body to process raw eggs. So eggs are one of the few proteins that benefit from being what? Heated. That's right. Their biological value actually goes up considerably when they're heated. And what's interesting also you may find is the yolk is the food sac, the white is the chick. Pretty powerful stuff, right? So the white is the albumin, that's the actual chick, and the egg yolk is what that chick eats when it's in the egg. So all the enzymes, all the good fats are inside the yolk. If you eat a lot of eggs like me, I probably eat 20 a week. I only maybe eat 15 of the yolks, but I still have some. It's important. Richest source of dietary biotin, acidic acid. Avocados are important. I've got a recipe for it. It's on my blog for avocado chocolate pudding. You won't even know there's an avocado in it. I actually did that recipe on the University of Hawaii television, and they were blown away by it. Acidic acid you'll get from avocados as well. Legumes, you'll see those come up a lot. The darker, the better. Mushrooms are very high in B vitamins, but guess what? You have to cook them. So see how some foods, it makes a difference whether they're raw or they're cooked. You have to break them down. Now you can cook them with, like ceviche, with lemons and limes to break them down, or you can use heat. Medium chain triglycerides. Again, coconut oil rears its head. Lauric acid, the only source that's higher than that, again, is breast milk. And lauric acid and capric acid is what they're saying is the real 1-2 punch to coconut oil. Lauric acid is unique to coconut oil, comprising about 50% of its fatty acids. Coconut oil is nature's richest source of lauric acid. The next high source is human breast milk at about 6 to 10%. 50% in coconut, 10% max in breast milk, because breast milk has to do so many other things, right? So again, they'll sell MCT oil, and it sounds more convenient, but once you compare MCT oil with coconut oil, it's totally lopsided. Coconut oil has so many other benefits. Antiviral, antibacterial. My daughter gets a cut, I clean it, coconut oil. The only lubricant in our house for skin, coconut oil. You do something called oil pulling, where you swish your mouth for 10 minutes with coconut oil, has some benefits. It's getting more notoriety now, and the notoriety is justified. Conjugated linoleic acid. You'll see this a lot in the fitness realm, all to help the mitochondria generate more energy. Also, fat metabolism is important too. I don't know where you can get kangaroo meat though, but I thought I would put that up there. I think it must be an Australian study, huh? But what's interesting is grass-fed beef. I looked this up. Who knows what silage is? Silage. Pardon?
Usually has to do with the grains in the silo.
It's the remnants of the bottom of the waste. It could be plastic. It could be. I mean, the definitions vary. So, 50% of the hay and silage, is it pronounced? Silage.
Silo.
Okay. So not good. So what they found was grass-fed. So whenever you can get grass-fed beef from a factual research nutritional basis, it's healthier. So they're more older, eating grass. So at the end, they're still giving up their life to feed us. But the point is, the research says the grass-fed. So always ask. People say, well, my grocer doesn't have that. Keep asking, because if they want your business, the best support, and this is where I kind of think of Gandhi, of the resistance to nonviolence, non-financial support. Just don't support them. If they're not going to follow your lead, don't support them. So this goes with dairy products as well. Now, I talked earlier about commercial dairy having a very high bacteria count coming out of the udder here. And the American Dairy Association is trying to raise that number, and that's unfortunate. So that's one reason I don't recommend eating commercial dairy products. If you want your calcium, you can pull the research on states with high dairy intake and osteoporosis and osteopenia, and they'll give you a heat map. And it's all in Wisconsin. All the big dairy states have the highest cardiovascular issues, osteopenia, and osteoporosis, unfortunately. Cool picture of the sun. So vitamin D, we talked about that for a few minutes. So what they did was they did a study on East Africa, and they found vitamin D concentrations, what is that, nanomoles per liter, right? And they came up with some numbers that we talked about earlier. Let me go back. So they talked about between 4 and 5,000 IUs when it used to be what, Doc? 400? Yeah, so they increased it by what, 10, 15 times. But there's a significant difference between, this is something you can look up online, between the vitamin D from the sun, because you'll get 2, 3, and that sulfamide, I believe it's pronounced, element that you don't get in the tablet. So it's significant. And what they're saying, the sulfamide helps all sorts of physiological functions over and beyond just taking vitamin D supplement by itself. If I lived in a place like, the Midwest where it was cold, 8 months out of the year, I definitely would take a vitamin D supplement, but I would definitely have UVA, UVB lights in my basement. In Russia, in certain parts of Siberia, they have like rooms like this with just UV lights, so you walk in it for a certain amount of time to get your vitamin D, so they don't get much sun in those areas. Another big flack I get from fitness people is, oh, you don't have exercise on your program. You don't talk about it. You don't think it's very good. It's certainly great. But if exercise fixed diabetes, this is a nation of what? Walkers and joggers, bicyclists. But remember, exercise is a form of what? Controlled trauma. So we have to always, when we're thinking about exercise, how much trauma is it causing? How much benefit is I'm getting? I'll give you an example. I ride an easy bike ride, maybe 60 miles a week at my lunch hour. Easy. I mean, keeping my breath. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then there's stairs where I go and down the beach and people are running the stairs. Well, last time I was there, a guy missed a step, fractured his tibia, inverted candlestick fracture. Probably the worst kind because they have to go in through the calf and all this kind of stuff. He's trying to get in shape. Now, he'll probably be laid up 3, 6 months, maybe a year. I think he's probably in his 40s. When the sand is 20 feet farther. Now, sand is one of the best forms of rehabilitation exercise for several reasons. It creates something called the imbibition reaction. Imbibition is the pumping of fluid inside the joint capsules. Sand is one of the only surfaces that can do that. You'll see rubberized surfaces, but man-made products don't appear to create this imbibition response like sand does. There was another study done where they got a runner, put him on a treadmill, and wired him. And then they got MMA, one of those dummies that they would punch, and they wired that, and they measured a jab and a heel strike on a treadmill, and found them to be similar. So running, I don't recommend on a hard surface just because of that trauma. Especially if you're 15, 20, 30 pounds overweight, you're going to throw your inflammation. And what if you damage a meniscus or fracture an ankle? You're done. So we have to get out of our mindset. Exercise doesn't mean automatically movement. So for example, for a yoga pose, they go in something called the chair pose. Now if you hold this pose for 10 seconds, I guarantee you your legs are going to start to rock. But are my joints moving? So I'm developing a whole series of exercises that a person 40 plus can do without doing something like a ballistic jumping around or flipping over truck tires and things of that nature. It looks nice from a visual perspective, but the body only cares about load and time in regards to the muscles. It doesn't care about how many times those joints are moving. It's going to wear out. And I'm in my 50s and I don't want to be wearing out yet. Make sense? Any questions? All the things we did in college were kind of, at least I did, were kind of idiotic exercise-wise. I've got some people that are on my Lean Body 360 program that are in the 300-pound range, scheduled for hip replacements. Are they going to do better off if they get down to 250 and get the hip replacements at 300? Yeah, because the doctors don't want to do surgery on them because they're too obese. But they can do exercises like this to begin to move. Sit on a chair. Do something movement-wise. Talk about what can you do? Maybe it's just move your arms in a chair for 40 seconds a day. Maybe every day add 5 seconds to it. To the average person who exercises, it seems like nothing, but the person who's used to sitting 6 to 8 hours in a chair, significant. Senior citizens, this is phenomenal. How many of you guys use these bands in your practice for joint rehab? The best. These are the best because what happens when you start using dumbbells for joints, the dumbbells kick in the muscle, and they told the tissues that are injured, usually the tendons and the tendons are taken out of the mixture. But bands cause that tendon to fire, and that's what you, or excuse me, cause the tendon to fire. That's what you want to rehab. Rarely is a rotator cuff problem, muscular problem. Usually it's a musculotendinal junction problem, and that's where the scarring takes place, and then you have to end up getting an MUA like me, which was great, but boy, it was a little painful there. Next day, Doc, I want to start exercising. What do I do? When's the last time you walked and got your own mail? My mailman usually brings it to the door for me because he knows I can't get out. Okay, leave a note on your door. Please leave mail in mailbox. You see what I mean? Simple steps. Again, we're trying to create a psychological, neurological pathway to get them moving, because when people get unhealthy and they have self-loathing and they're obese, they don't want to be out in the world because they think the world hates them, they hate themselves, all this business. But walking to their mailbox, it's a way to kind of step out and then hurry up and step back in. So you're creating pathways. These are all the things that I talk about in my program, and all things I've learned over the years that back then, how does walking to your mailbox make a difference? Well, we've got to meet the person where they're at. A couple people that are on my program haven't left their house in like months. Again, this will come in my mind more and more. You've got to remove all the obstacles. So if you guys want to get into wellness medicine or support a diabetic, remember, not treating their diabetes, to support their low glycemic, low load foods. You cannot make it, because initially when they listen to what you're saying, they're listening for all the reasons to do what? Say no. Whether it's a chiropractic patient, medical patient, it doesn't matter. Because a lot of them, by the time they've gotten you for chronic problems, have done in their minds, they've done everything already. They've been there and done that. I've been on the national programs. I've boxed my lunch. When they start seeing that you're not doing any of that stuff and you're getting phenomenal results, now you've got an ear. Okay, we'll go through protein pretty quick. How are we doing on time?
I'm about half an hour.
Okay. Okay, I went through the BV chart for you guys already. You should have that down pretty much. So here's the numbers. I'm giving you guys this and also giving my live viewers this number. You can obtain this number. Now, these are the calculations you want to do.